I love it. Um, BBC News this morning. You know the rolling news you get. So they repeat the same story 17 times over the space of 4 hours or whatever it is. Funnily enough, they didn't repeat this one. Now, there was 84-year-old, I don't know, Fred Jones, whatever his name was. He probably doesn't exist, to be honest. I mean, it's probably made up. But he died this time last year, apparently, of heart failure. And some months later, tests were done which proved it was COVID. Some months later. I think you're forgetting, BBC News, as I put on Twitter this morning, that post-mortems were outlawed under coronavirus legislation. Coronavirus legislation, by the way, which was decided by the collective cabinet decisions. Remember that? Yeah. That's so, right, that the reason they did that, that's because no one minister can ever be held to account for anything that goes wrong, because they were collective cabinet decisions. And of course, Boris, that was the 2 weeks Boris was off pretending to have coronavirus, and he was actually in rehab. So that was when all that was one of the first things that went, along with the medical companies which weren't allowed to be sued if the coronavirus vaccine went wrong. That was one of the first things which went into coronavirus legislation, is that post-mortems wouldn't happen. But according to BBC, I forget the guy's name, I forget the name they said, but like I say, he's probably made up anyway. But yeah, 84-year-old Fred Jones, who died of heart failure, actually, you know, some months later when post-mortems weren't allowed, it was concluded it was coronavirus that killed him. Do you remember? I forget what it was about. It got to be at least a year ago now, if not more. And they had Jim Davidson on the BBC. And I forget what the subject was about, like I say. And they were saying, but this woman who was a mother and who used to have an executive position had been made redundant. And then Jim Davidson went, well, why don't you just make her ginger with a limp as well? So I can make more fun of her. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, she's made up, isn't she? They all are. And they do. They just fucking lie. So there you go. Whatever your name was, Fred Jones. Not only was the original post-mortem wrong, they then carried out a post-mortem when they weren't allowed to carry out post-mortems by coronavirus law, which they'd instigated. Do you still think this is about a virus?